There's some cosmic sparks flying tonight, there's no doubt about that. Well, our next guest is a brother who is a revolutionary in every sense of the word. His understanding of courtroom technology, theory, and the law are really only surpassed by what we all understand is his total commitment to the liberation of African people worldwide. When we look over the years of the Republican domination of this country, one has to go back, and those of us who were around a good 20 years ago with some level of consciousness remember a term called law and order. And it was a very key political strategy that the Republican administration began putting forward at that time, and that ultimately has given them very much a hold on the White House, with the exception of President Carter and a very brief interruption that occurred. We have seen Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Bush. And they all have basically taken that particular theme of law and order and used it in various methods to ultimately exploit their own particular aims and objectives towards us as a people and towards what some feel is the genocide of us as a people. This particular brother was able to beat them in the ring of law and order. There are many cases that come to mind when you think of Brother Alton Maddox. I recall at one point when Reverend Al Sharpton was being brought up on 67 counts of something. I mean, it was just like, it was ridiculous. Nobody, I mean, the press put this thing together everywhere. The newspaper said, this is impossible. 67 counts, he'll serve 400 years in prison. I mean, they had the whole thing. It was impossible for him to possibly be defended. You all know the story of that. This brother defended him. He walked clear of every single count. He is like Marcus Garvey in that he couldn't be controlled, so ultimately they tried to deport him out of the legal system. But we all know they cannot stop this champion. He is our own attorney, Alton Maddox.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gary. Well, since I have been invited to the Slave Theater to speak tonight, something that doesn't happen too often, I won't start out with the customary chant, no justice, no peace. As Roy and others put this program together, it became obvious to me, and I know that our speakers tonight somewhat rushed through this, but you really cannot do justice to this subject in one setting. And certainly I can't do justice within the time that is allotted to me in one setting. So I think that we have been trying to get people to come back on the 6th to really expand on this and really to finalize this. And everyone has agreed to do that. So Professor Wilson, I know you were running through a lot, but you're going to get a chance for an encore. As I was asked to come here to speak about global white supremacy, the legal effects of it, one of the things that you do in the courtroom is that you bring on your exhibits to prove your case. And so I reached out for my exhibit. Exhibit A was in Washington, D.C., and Exhibit B was in Oklahoma. And somehow or another, Rochester had to serve Jack Bennett today, and Beulah had to do some cooking out in Oklahoma. So the legal effects of white supremacy are not here. As a matter of fact, Judge Tom was scheduled to go on the Supreme Court in November, but somebody from the porno shop called him up and said, if you wait until November to go on, you may not be able to sit on a case that's going to deal with the future of pornography. And so Clarence was sworn in today to ensure that pornography lives on. When you began to understand the white man, and you also begin to understand Clarence, one of the things you have to do is this. Clarence said at his swearing in with the president last week that his best friend was his wife. And that's important. We won't have a chance to get into that tonight. Maybe next week we talk about Satanism. This topic's sort of limited tonight to something else. But in saying that, I think that we did not focus on the right person. These hearings should not have been about Clarence. They should have been about Clarence's wife and what she is into. I said a couple weeks ago, before these hearings got started, that this hearing was about homosexuality and lesbianism. And I just only add to that the hearing was really about homosexuality, lesbianism, and Satanism. And when you begin to understand that she was a member of this organization called CAN, Cult Awareness Network, misleading term, as all whitey's terms are. But I would suggest between here and next week that you do a little research on CAN, and we'll get into Satanism next week. I'll stick to my topic this week. But in listening to the other speakers, what was interesting was that Professor Wilson talked about Columbus and not focusing on Columbus, but focusing on what was behind Columbus. And we have a tendency to focus on the wrong thing. And we therefore miss the point. We get a false reading of what is happening. And so when we begin to focus on the white man, what we really have to focus on is the white man's best friend. And I won't get into that this week. But I think we all know who the white man's best friend. And in understanding the white man's best friend, we can begin to understand the legal system that Whitey has put together. Because there's a relationship in that, but I will leave that to my lecture on biology. But I won't get into that tonight. I'll leave that because we deal with the legal aspects tonight. But in order to understand the legal aspect, you have to understand so many other things. You know, one of the things about really being a great lawyer is having a mastery of so many subjects. You know, and sometimes you find yourself in a medical library, sometimes you deal with psychology and so many other things. But what we're going to focus in on tonight, which I think is extremely important, and the subject that I am particularly interested in now, is the whole notion of psycholinguistics. We must begin to call things by their proper name and begin to make an appropriate analysis of that. And so we have to begin to look at the legal system much differently than we have looked at it in the past. Now, when we look at the legal system, it is my opinion that there are two symbols that are important to understand the legal system. One is the scales of justice, which a lot of people don't understand. The legal system to the white man is like a boxing match. It's a contest. And the first thing the boxers have to do is get on the scales. Well, that's what happens in court. when you go in the courtroom, one of the plaintiff and the other the defendant, they said, well, Mr. Plaintiff, get on the scales. And you say, hey, wait a minute. I thought I was here for justice. But you see, that's what those scales are for, to weigh you in. And the one that is weighed as the heavyweight outweighs the lightweight in terms of economic power. And that is the reason why we are always losing, because when we go in there and they weigh us in, we are always being outweighed. You see, because when the man rules against us, you know, Whitey said, well, you know, I had to rule against you because that was a heavyweight and you a lightweight. And you ought to be glad that I ruled against you, because if I had to rule against you, you had to get in that fight with him and you would have really gotten whipped. So you ought to be thankful that I ruled in your favor so you wouldn't have to get whipped by this heavyweight. You see, it has nothing to do with what your case is about. It has something to do with the power that you bring to the courtroom as opposed to the power that your opposition bring, and the scales of justice are used to determine that. You see, I don't know what we thought these scales were for. I mean, you know, the white man don't hide his stuff. You know, Negro just look at stuff and start hallucinating and imagining something else. You know, but this cracker puts it right out there. You know, you see the scale and he's telling you, I'm getting ready to weigh something. I mean, it's right there. I don't know why we get confused about what this man put right out there. You know, Negro thought, well, it's justice, I just gonna do right, and I know I'm right, and I know everything gonna work out all right. You know what I mean? It ain't got nothing to do with that at all. It has nothing to do with that at all. So we have to begin to improve our vision and deal with our language. You see, we got to make sure that our eyes are operating on 2020. And in fact, they have not been. You know, Dr. Clarke has lost his sight, but has greater vision than anybody in this room. Let us not lose sight of that. The other thing about the American legal system and legal systems in all European countries, but particularly here, is that the other great symbol of American justice and European justice, but particularly American justice, is the eagle. You see, that symbolizes his judicial system, because the eagle is a scavenger. And that's what the white man's law is. It's a scavenger. You see, government does not produce anything. And, you know, when we look at someone who has a Rolls Royce, a Mercedes, lives in a mansion, and has $6 or $7 million stashed around, you know, people say, well, man, what do you do? And then the guy said, well, I don't do anything, I don't work. And then people say, well, man, that guy must be in the drug trade. He must be doing something illegal. Well, you see, that's the way government is. You have a city government that has a $29 billion budget and does no work. It doesn't produce anything. So if it does not produce anything, and it has $29 billion a year to operate with, then you must imagine that this government is engaged in criminal activity, because that's the only way that it could function. And so when you begin to understand this, and this is psychological, and we have to deal with this on another day, is that you must, in order to understand European institutions, you must understand the criminal mind. You must understand the criminal mind, because all of his history indicates criminality, and everything that he has acquired has been as a result of criminality. And I remember last year I have a Bill of Rights speech that I made at Columbia last year, and Roy, those have been asking me to give that here at some point in terms of dealing with the Bill of Rights. But just as a preview, which I won't have time to do tonight, is that the Constitution was written by the criminal mind. I mean, if you read this document, it becomes very clear that it is a criminal document. And you see, when it gets to the amendments, and it talks about the right to a trial by a jury of your peers, who but a criminal would write something like that in a document? All right, you see, when these bad boys sat down, you know, and everybody said, well, man, you know, we may be getting ourselves in a little trouble here. You know, I mean, we're in some bad stuff. So the signer said, well, let us make sure that we have a trial by a jury of our peers. You see, if we're going to be tried, let other gangsters and other criminals sit in the jury box. You see, and when you begin to understand that the Fifth Amendment says you have the right to be quiet. Now, who but a criminal would be informing other criminals to be quiet? You see, so when you begin to study this document, I can prove to you on a criminal mind lecture that it was criminals who put this document together to protect criminals and criminality. But what I want to talk about is 3 quick points. And then I'll be through for tonight, but it has to require a lot of expansion because these are very interesting subjects. And, you know, when I went through law school, like everybody else, you were not really taught the law. And I look at about 99% of most lawyers now, and they have absolutely no idea about the law. And when they go into courtrooms, they actually go into courtroom arguing for their continued oppression, because they have no idea of what they're arguing about. And, you know, the one thing in terms of my career is that I say this all the time because it's true. There was no better trial lawyer in America than me. I mean, there's no question about that. But the reason why that was so was not because I was a great genius. There was nobody who studied law and legal institutions more than I did. I studied this 24 hours a day because I understood that I had been miseducated in the law, and I had to work this out for myself in order for me to be effective in representing black people. Because the entire law school education was never directed toward representing black people. So when I got out and I came up with these new strategies and techniques, the white boy did not know how to deal with it, because the whitey had never been taught that himself. So when I was going in a courtroom playing guerrilla warfare and military science, nobody understood what was going on. All right? But when we began to look at certain concepts, and these are very important, there is no such thing as a constitutional right. All right? And you know, most lawyers use that word, but they don't know what they're talking about. And you know you're in trouble when you get a Negro up there talking about your constitutional rights. I mean, you may well get ready to go to jail right then. All right? All right? When they start talking about your constitutional rights, Jack, you better get ready to boogie. All right? You know, because after reading everything in the law, I realized there was only one case that was relevant, and the white man has printed over millions of cases. And that one was Dred Scott, and that's the only case I ever used. And I would whip people on Dred Scott. You know, everybody will be reading 100 cases, I just get Dred Scott, you know, and go in the courtroom with Dred Scott and win on that concept, because it defined us properly in the American judicial system. And that's what's important, is appropriate definitions. You see, if you misdefine yourself, you've already lost the battle. You know, just on misdefinition. So misdefinition is very key And phrasing the right question is very key. You see, and that's another problem that we have. We never phrase the right question. We never phrase the right issue, and we always lose. I can tell you whether you're going to win or lose by the way you phrase your issues. And so all I have to do is say, what's your issue? If you phrase it wrong, you lost. Wow. And you know, that happens so many times. I've come to the slave many times, predicted things, but I predicted them scientifically because I knew that you were misdefining your issues, which is a subject into itself that we won't have time tonight to go into. But going back, it is no such thing as constitutional rights. What it is constitutional authority. You see, it's not a constitutional right, it's constitutional authority. And when you read the Constitution appropriately, then you will know that there is no constitutional right. Each provision, each amendment does not talk about the rights of the people. That's only in the preamble. You know, everybody reads the preamble and then that's it. But if you analyze the document, it does not talk about rights, it's talk about authority. For example, if you look at for example, I'm just going to read this so you can see them real quick. The Third Amendment reads like this: no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Let me read that again. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Now that does not say that you have a right not to have soldiers in your house. It says that the government has the authority to place soldiers in your house. You see, it doesn't say what you think it says. So when you say, well, I have a right, you know, just like people say, well, I have a right not to be sexually harassed. Well, that is not so in the workplace in America. You know, white people have a right, or they are given a license to harass you sexually in the workplace. And the reason why you know that they have that right is because they are saying that we got to pass a statute. Now, what that statute does is say, and this is what all statutes do, it says not that you don't have a right to sexually harass, it says that you have a right to sexually harass up to a certain point. You see? So it's never you don't have the right. So when you say, well, I'm being sexually harassed, well, the Supreme Court has only ruled once on this, and this was a case where the guy had raped this woman repeatedly on the job and had done a lot of other funny things. And so they said, well, that may reach the level of sexual harassment. But they only said that without Clarence on the bench. All right? Now, Clarence now is on the bench, Souter is on the bench, Thurgood is off the bench, Brennan is off the bench, and so raping a woman under the Thomas Supreme Court may be all right. You see, but in any event, sexual harassment up to a point is okay. So when you look at the white man's law, it does not say what you say it says. You know, but your interpretation of the law is really a reflection of your faith in him. Right. You see, and the more faith that you have in him, the more of an inability of you to see what the law really says. You know, and you can sit down with lawyers and they will misconstruct what the statute actually says because of their underlying faith in the man himself. But if you don't know who the man is, you're going to misdefine what his law actually says. Another amendment, just be very quickly. The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, home, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Now that doesn't say the government can't search your house. And they don't define what is an unreasonable search. You see, so that's the authority to search your house. It's not your right not to have your house searched. So you have to begin to understand the white man's way of expressing himself before we can really get a lot deeper. Now, the 13th Amendment is where he claims that he outlawed slavery. But the statute does not say that. I mean, the Constitution doesn't say that. What the Constitution says is this. It says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. But in the small print it says, this provision is not necessarily enforceable. You see? So, because the next line says, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. It didn't say that Congress must create legislation. It said that Congress can create legislation. And the power that Congress has in creating legislation, Congress turn right around and repeal that legislation. You see, so there is no constitutional amendment in this country that bars slavery. So at any moment now, we will all be heading back to the plantation. All right, so, you know, I don't want nobody to sit up here and say, well, man, I know we done got past that hurdle, because you have not. Whitey has been waiting down the road for you because there is no constitutional provision that outlaws slavery. Because in order to outlaw slavery, it depends upon what Congress thinks at any given moment. And you know what that's about. So that's your legal status in America. We have to be very clear about this and how the law is and how we must read it. Now, going back to the 7th Amendment, since they said that slavery shall not be had in this country, going back to the 7th Amendment, let's check this out. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishment inflicted. Now what that means is A, that you can be subject to a bond, B, that you can be subject to fines, and C, that you can be subject to punishment. Okay? It does not bar anything. It gives the white man the authority to place you in slavery before you have ever been convicted, which is in violation if you believe in the white man in the 13th Amendment, which says that involuntary servitude is prohibited. Because going back to the 7th Amendment, to be on bond means that you're in slavery. Because bond is a derivative of bondage. The term bond means that you are a slave of the state. So anytime that you're merely charged with a crime and they put you on a bond, then you have become a slave of the state. And so therefore, if the 13th Amendment meant that slavery was prohibited, you couldn't be subject to a bond before you were convicted, which would fly in the face of what the white man's language says. So these are the kinds of things that we have to be very clear about as a people in understanding, A, the language that he uses. You see, beyond everything else, the language that he uses. We can talk about all this other stuff later, but if we don't begin to deal with his language, which in effect, in my opinion, and I'm not a psychologist, and Dr. Wilson, I'm sort of a jackleg, of these things. But, I begin to believe that the more that we use the oppressor's language, the more that we become like the oppressor. I believe there's some psychological effect to that, you see? And I believe that as these Negroes talk about, I got to speak properly, and that I'm articulate, I think that begins to change the mental framework of that individual. And I think that we have to be very clear about this whole notion of language that we have not really gotten into deeply enough as we should. But we cannot free ourselves until we begin to understand the oppressor's language and understand the psychological effects that that language itself has on us as a people and our own independent ability to reason and to think and to solve problems. Now, I'm gonna run through these other things real quick and then we'll do it the next time. When we talk about the government as a scavenger, let us understand that the government does not produce anything, and that becomes very important, and the government operates by taking from you, and there is a redistribution of wealth, okay? Because every June, you have worked for the first 5 months for the government, all right? Now, Oliver Wendell Holmes said this. I didn't say this. Oliver Wendell Holmes was a American Supreme Court jurist. Oliver Wendell Holmes says that the police powers of the government amounted to larceny. Okay, in effect, what Holmes was saying is that every action on behalf of the government is a criminal action. And if you are properly reading whatever the government does, the government has a license to commit crimes. And the only thing that you need is a penal code to go down the list of the kinds of crimes that they have committed. For example, most people in here, if they had their own free choice and was not forced to, would not pay taxes. All right? But we are subject to the same routine that organized crime subject on store owners. We have to pay up a price for doing business. That's called extortion. All right? So we are all victims of extortion. You know? Now, you know, a lot of times you go to a person's house and say, man, the government just came out here and took all my property. And I said, they came out here and just took your property? Yeah, they took my property. Why? Well, because they said I owe something. I said, well, when they came out here, how many of them was it? They said, well, about 10 of them. I said, well, they big guys or what? They said, yeah, they were big strappy dudes. Did they have guns on them? Yeah, they had guns on them. Did they tell you to shut up and get over in the corner? I said, brother, you was not the subject of a taking. You was robbed. All right? You see, we have to begin to use the language. You know, it wasn't just that the government took something from you. The government came out here and committed armed robbery. All right? That's what that is about. You see, when you have to pay all of these penalties, that's usury. You know, the government said, well, you got to pay everything. You know what I mean? That's usury. That's a license of the government to commit all of these criminal actions because it is an extension of the law itself. And so, finally, my last point for the night is this, and we have to be very clear about this. We have never, and we got to stop using, we have never had a civil rights movement in America. All right? All right, let's be very clear. We have never had a civil rights movement in America. The right to park your behind next to a white behind was not civil rights. All right? The right to share the ability to stink up an outhouse with a cracker was not civil rights. I mean, it wasn't. All right? And we got to be very clear about it. You know, everybody talking the civil rights movement. Where? When did it happen? Who led the civil rights movement? All right? Because there is nothing in the Constitution that's legitimate that talks about civil rights. That's legitimate. Now, there are some illegitimate clauses in the Constitution, but there is nothing in the Constitution that deals with civil rights. What the Constitution deals with, and what we have to be clear about, the Constitution and American life talks about producers and consumers. And our problem in America is that we are consumers and the law prevents us from becoming producers. That's our problem in America. And the reason why the American courts were prepared to allow us eventually to sit at a lunch counter next to a white person was to expand our consumer rights. The ability to buy a sandwich at a lunch counter, which had nothing to do with our civil rights. You see, but if we keep confusing this, we're going to be off point, because America will never give us civil rights. All right? It was never intended, because the original Constitution, which talks about 3/5 of a man, was never repealed. That's still in the Constitution. They didn't take that out. You know, generally when they write a new constitutional provision, they take out the old one. They didn't take that bad boy out. All right? Because they meant that to exist. So there's no such thing. So if you want to know what the struggle is with Clarence Thomas, the struggle is that Clarence believed in construing the Constitution according to the original framers of the Constitution. Okay, that's Clarence's position is that in order to understand the Constitution, you cannot expand the Constitution beyond what the original signers intend that to be. So when Negro talk about, well, let's give Clarence a chance. To do what? I mean, Negro give everybody a chance. You know, I mean, it's amazing, you know, of us giving somebody a chance. I was listening to a radio station about a couple weeks ago, not yours, one Friday when you were not on. And I got absolutely berserk. You know, it's hard for me to listen to talk radio, Gary. Because some people call up as nuts. You know, I believe that they allow somebody to get out of Bellevue or somewhere to Nut House, you know, and make these calls, because we don't listen to what we say. You know, and this is very important. Person called up and said, you know, why don't we give Dave a chance? And then it became a rap song. Everybody started calling and saying, why don't we give Dave a chance? And I said, hey, what's going on here? I mean, a Negro go nuts. I mean, give him a chance to do what? I mean, what are we giving him a chance to do? All right, and then beyond that, what really bothered me was we are giving him a chance. All right? People call up and say, well, you know, I'm tired of people calling up criticizing the mayor. Well, I got a right to call up and criticize the mayor. All right? But we are giving him a chance because if we stop giving him a chance, we will put up a recall petition. You see, not giving somebody a chance is being punitive. You got a right to give somebody a chance and then criticize what they do. We got to learn the difference between criticism and punitive action. Right. You know, when you Negroes get confused, so when you call them and criticize somebody, then they take it as you're taking punitive action. Right. You are not. Criticism does not mean punitive action. Let's understand the difference. If we decided to be punitive, we would put a recall petition up, have so many people to sign it, and kick him out of office after 2 years. You know, it ain't like we don't know what to do. You know? So, I mean, when somebody called up and said, well, let's give him a chance, we are giving him a chance. You know, I know how to go down there tonight and put a recall petition together. You know, so we got to be very clear about that. And just going back to this whole thing about producers and consumers, because that's a whole different topic in itself. And you see what that brings in is this. When Congress got ready to enact the civil rights statutes, in order for you to sit at a lunch counter next to a white person and get jungle fever, because you know, right after 1960, no, I mean, you know, all this stuff was playing, because right after 65, then they brought this case in, Loving versus Virginia. And that said that Negroes could marry white folks. All right, and that's what the creation of jungle fever, because the white man knew down the line that he was gonna need his white women to keep y'all in check. You know what I mean? Since y'all think that she's a minority along with y'all, you know, and that y'all got something in common. All right? You know, this is the brainwashing Whitey is into. You know, and you are buying into this. So you can't get a Negro leader to start talking if I first talk about women's rights. All right? That becomes the beginning. But understand now, when the Civil Rights Statute was created in the 64 and 65, it was the Commerce Clause that Congress relied on. All right? Not civil rights. The Commerce Clause. So even Congress understood that it was the Commerce Clause and not the Civil Rights Clauses that would allow you to sit at a lunch counter next to a white person. Now, it is my contention that the most important aspect of law, and there are all kinds of different subjects, but the most important subject in the law is not constitutional law. Right. It's not criminal law. It's not family law, so to speak. But the most important law is antitrust law. You see, because in antitrust law, you deal with the whole notion of producers and consumers and who can become producers. How economic markets are allocated. You see, that is part of antitrust law. That's what we're talking about, market power. That's the reason why when y'all went over to Church Avenue and started boycotting, the powers that be understood that you were disrupting the market. Right. You understand? You were disrupting the market. So in order to really have an impact on America, you got to disrupt the market. You got to know what the market is, and then you got to disrupt the market. Because that is what America is about. And you was beginning to upset the apple cart. And you see, you don't have to upset the entire market. The only thing you have to do is upset the profit margin. You see, you don't have to just make sure that they do not make a profit. And then you'll begin to succeed. So they said, no, we got to stop this. We can't let them, because they are the most important consumers in America, because they don't demand anything. You see, so our dollar is worth more than any other dollar. That's why everybody rather have our dollar than any other dollar, because there are no strings attached to our dollars. You see, it's a free dollar, and that's why it's very important. But going back to understand this, why was Bork nominated as a Supreme Court Justice? And, you know, everybody said, well, yeah, Bork was out to get black people. He was. But Bork is not considered a constitutional scholar. Bork is considered an antitrust scholar. You see, and what Bush is doing is using scientific means to destabilize us as consumers. You see, by dealing with antitrust, we look over at constitutional law. You know, we look over at civil rights. And Whitey is doing a reaction on us with something else, which is what always happens. You know what I mean? They have us looking left and they coming right. All right? You know what I mean? That is something that always happens, because we must begin to understand this structure. You see, because you cannot combat this structure, and that's the reason why, you know, we said that we had to do more than one night here, because we got to reorient ourselves. We got to come up with a new terminology and a new definition and a new vision and an ability to create the right issues. You know, during the mayoral race, for example, everybody said we got to have a black mayor. Well, that became the issue. And everybody worked on that issue. And while you were saying we'd have a black mayor, I said the man that you get ready to elect is going to be caught in blackface. Now, I wasn't a genius. And I think most people realize that that's what we have, caught in blackface. But I wasn't a genius, you see, in coming to that conclusion. Why was I able to come to that conclusion? Because I heard the way you framed the issue. You see, what you did was this. You said we got to have a black mayor. Okay? Then I knew that in political parties, the most important thing is not a personality. The most important thing is a platform. Right. So if you are focusing on a black mayor, and the white power structure said, well, yeah, we know we might be able to live with that because they don't have a platform to go along with it. You know, let's continue the platform that we had. Mm-hmm. All right, which is Koch's platform. So therefore, when you put two and two together, you have Koch's platform plus a black face. So you have Koch and black face. You see, it doesn't take a genius to do that. It's just a matter of analysis. You see, we do not gather information and then analyze information. And we always develop a label that everybody starts chanting to. You know, run, they run, run, they run, run, they run, run, they run. And nobody has made an analysis of what this is about. You see, and so we're always, you know, failing. I've said now, I told Mr. Brown that I won't discuss this conversation, but I said, you know, I'm going to start keeping quiet. I'm going to tell you why, because you see, everybody looks at me as a nut. Now I'm serious, you know, every time I come out with something, everybody says, man, that guy's crazy. You know what I mean? I mean, you better leave it alone, because you know what happens is that when you predict something, and what we must start doing is we got to start forecasting. See, I believe in forecasting. I believe in projecting ahead. So when you started forecasting, you become like Noah and the Ark. You know, and Noah running around there building a ship. And everybody said, that clown is crazy. All right, and everybody kept booking. Because Noah was forecasting and everybody else was living in the present. You see, and bragging about the past. But we got to begin to project above that, and part of this whole thing about white global supremacy or global white supremacy is the gathering of information. You see, and that's a whole different topic. You see, and the ability to analyze that information. But those are things that we're going to get into. See, I'm not going to make any more predictions. All right, I got a lot more predictions I can make. But I'm not going to make any more predictions, but I'm going to begin to give you the tools for you to make the predictions yourself. Thank you very much.
Brother Alton Maddox, brothers and sisters. Let's give it up. Alton Maddox. Yes. Our program continues. We have an announcement that is going to come up right now before our panelists get the opportunity of responding to questions from those of you who are here who have questions or comments that you'd like to share with them. We will have a couple of announcements in this case.
It is my position that what really frightened America about our league is that our league, for one of the few times, especially in our lifetime, said that he was prepared to recognize the true separation of church and state, and not in some type of false sense, and that therefore, recognizing a separation between church and state, that he was prepared to give honor to his teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And what that did in American life was, for one of the few times, it brought down the white man as the obedient person that blacks have to obey. You know, it's like going back to the plantation, and the white man comes down to the field and says, John, I want you to do this. And then John turned around and said, well, I better ask Henry. And the boss said, ask Henry. I mean, you know, I told you this is what you do. And the reason why that becomes important is that it is my contention that the problem with our religious institutions is that Reverend Rupenholler is a pagan. All right? And that what we have in our community are devil worshippers. All right? Because if you adorn a white Jesus on your wall, and if you bow down to the white man, then you got to be a devil worshiper. Because when Elijah Muhammad said that the white man was a devil, you know, most black people say, well, you know, Elijah is crazy. All right? You know, I mean, you know, you can't say that. And what is important is that if you are around Negroes and you say, you know, Reverend Rupenholler, the white man is a devil, you know, he'll say, well, you better shut your mouth. Yeah. But then Reverend Rupenholler will turn around and use God's name in vain. You know, so you got a situation where we are giving respect to the white man, by saying don't call him a devil. But when you use the God name in vain, like, the God, the whatever, then it's all right. So what I'm saying is that until we get to the point, the reason why religion has failed is because we do not acknowledge, as Ali did, that I'm not following a white government, I'm not following a white man, I'm not worshiping a white man or a white government. I'm worshiping somebody that looks like myself. You see, and that's the reason why we don't have black leadership. Because if we had black leadership, then we would follow somebody. You see, but we will not follow somebody. So the white man steps in and say, I want 50,000 y'all to go to war. We're going to war. I don't care what our religious practices may have been. You see, so that's not anything but worshiping the devil. And so when you say that, can we develop institutions in this society?
Those of us who say that we are ready, is it appropriate for us to put down roots to buy buildings, to have property, that kind of thing?
Okay, well, I'm going to get to that. When we say that we are building institutions, first of all, psychologically, we have to be prepared to only obey each other. All right, that's the first thing. In terms of the real psychological development, so when you say someone's conscious can only mean that I will not follow the devil. All right, that's what consciousness means. I'm only going to follow a black man or a black woman. That's period. Now, once you develop that, all right, that then begins the only way where you can begin to attempt to build institutions in this society. But I think, as Dr. Wilson pointed out, that the white man will die first before he relinquishes white supremacy. So there's going to have to ultimately be a confrontation. But I think that in terms of our own development, once we understand how to build institutions, then we can build them somewhere else as well as building them here. So learning how to build institutions is not necessarily something that will become lost. You see, even if you had to go somewhere else, but the nature of American society is such that the structure of this society is already in place, and that there is nothing in this society going to allow us to coexist with him on an equitable basis. But I think the main point, though, is one about Ali, and that is to recognize that what made Ali great is because this was one of the few black men who said, I'm going to follow another black man. Elijah Muhammad told me not to go to war. And see, that's what really shook up white America. The idea that you will find a black man who will say, I'm only going to follow another black man. If a black man give me an order to do something, I will do it. And until we can develop that kind of consciousness, then we're not going to even have the framework in which to begin to even attempt to build these institutions.
We're live. We're very good. Right to our stage. Just one second. Just lock the microphone. Go ahead.
The answer for that, all I must add is that people rise and fall within the context of institutions. But if you have an institution that's black, has no black values, then you have no institution.
Let's just pull the mic a little closer to Dr. Clarke. People apparently can't hear.
No, I was just calling attention to the fact that if you have an institution that's black and you have no black values, then you have no institution. Then your institution becomes part of the instrument of your own oppression. When an institution be of any value to you, then your values must govern that institution. This is why our predominantly black colleges are losing their value, because they don't even teach honestly about black people. They have no black values, no black curriculum, and just white people and black face.
We're going to our stage like microphone.
Hello to the brothers and sisters, hello to the honored guests. I have two questions, one for Dr. Clarke and one for Attorney Alton Maddox. To Dr. Clarke, I began to discuss how their religion was built on cultures from the Nile Valley. And I began to explain to them, as I learned from the African professors such as yourself, I began explaining to them how the mythology for their belief was based on cultures that came thousands of years before Abraham was even born, the first Hebrew. And it seems that in desperation, they had to come up with something, because they were stumbled, they had to come up with something, and they said, well, where you get these dates from, the stating system was probably made by a white man, and being that the stating system was made by a white man, how can African scholars stand on it? And I said, well, I happen to believe that they have researched themselves, so I stand on it. But as far as knowing about how they go about the dating system, I didn't know. So my question is, what is that dating system? How
dating system?
Yes, as far as Egyptian artifacts are concerned, as far as Hebrew,
But that was already done. Most religious arguments are a waste of time, because your listener's made up his mind what he's going to believe no matter what you say. And we stop engaging into, and sometimes you sit around a whole lot of documents and I'm going to read them. And sometimes if you mention white documents, the blacks are going to say that it's white mistake. Some of those brilliant work ever done on the argument of religion been done by whites. And some brilliant work was done by blacks also. They're not going to be John Jackson's Christianity Before Christ and Dr. Ben's African Origins of the Major Western Religions. And there's two books written by a white scholar, among his books, Alton Maddox, Who is This King of Glory? Probably the best book ever written on the Christ story. A shadow of the 3rd century. Another book on the development of Christianity, and his book on the lost Christianity. I mean, a whole lot of people want to argue. Really, they don't want to read, they don't want to do research, and they want to watch their ego at your expense. You have to understand, when you're in these kind of catch-22 arguments, the best way out of it is to put your right foot in front of your left foot in front of your
very much. Alton Maddox, as far as Clarence Thomas, what organization was this wife involved in? You just left us hanging on that.
No, well, the name of the organization was Cult Awareness Network. The acronym is CAN, and it is an organization that should be studied. One, in terms of its own practices, and then, as an aside, I would say this. I think that when you go back to Tawana Brown, that you're going to find that those persons that were involved in her kidnapping and abduction, that the practice of Satanism was very much practiced up in that area, up in Dutchess County and around that area. And so what we're dealing with some cults that are out here, and we're dealing with white people who have some strange worshiping practices. And I think that there are people out here who certainly did not bring to bear that she was a member of such a cult, and that cult was engaged in some satanic practices that should be examined. It's very interesting that nobody really dwelled in her background as we were dealing with Clarence Thomas. And a lot of times, what we have to begin to do is this. I say this so often, but it becomes very key. Whoever is in front of the camera, don't ever look at that person for your answers. Always look at the person next to that person. That is the person who will determine who that person is before the camera. So if you really want to know who Clarence Thomas is, you really have to know who his wife is. And as I said before, some of the things that Anita Hill was saying probably did take place. Now the question whether she was consenting to that or not is what has to be debated. But as far as the conversation is concerned, there's no question that Clarence does have some funny practices that he's engaged in, and that next week, I believe that if Reverend Bevel talks about what he has told me, you will also find out that George Bush is engaged in some funny practices. And that like really gives us some enlightenment as to the real relationship between Bush and Clarence Thomas. And I will only say that in looking at our black leadership in the future, let us not discount the fact that our black leadership is possibly going to be made up of homosexuals and lesbians. All right? And that why that is important to the white man is that he can control our leaders through sex. You see, and whisper and consult with our leaders in the bedroom and send those leaders back into our community. So you're going to see jungle fever in all kinds of directions. All right? I think that we really need to be very much aware of our leadership, and even as we look at some of our leaders now, there's no question that many of them are sleeping with whites. Some of them are sleeping with whites of the same sex. Exactly.
We're live with St. Peter. We'll move to our stage right microphone for a question or a comment. Thank you.
Yes, my question is to Brother Alton Maddox. Is it correct to infer from your analysis that Africans in America are not citizens of the United States?
Yes, it is absolutely clear that there is nothing that you can point to that has made us citizens in fact in this country. And that, one of the things, and I think that, Dr. Clarke and others probably can really examine this, is the fact that when we walked off of that plantation, so to speak, that became a very critical moment. Because if we became citizens of this country, that was another act of white supremacy. Because why would people who've been kidnapped from their land then be automatically hijacked into the Constitution if that's not white supremacy? I mean, if you've been kidnapped, and they're going to settle the score, they will allow you to go back to your family and to your land. But to tell you that you're going to be included into the Constitution means that you have been forced against your will to carry on a citizenship that is not appropriate. And what is very interesting here is that when we talk about the Reconstruction period, it is my belief that what happened between 1875, so to speak, and around 1930 was not as bad as what happened after 1930. Because I believe that when we look at that period after 1875, although we were for a moment given certain political opportunities, so to speak, what was significant about that period in my review of history is that we were allowed to reconstruct our families. All right, and so it was, and when we look at the Reconstruction period, we said, well, boy, we lost a lot. We didn't lose a lot because we were bringing our families back together. That wasn't losing. You see, the white man got us so addicted to, his political system, and the fact that one minute we were supposed to be U.S. senators, and then the next minute we were not. And then we gauged our values on what now we lost. We didn't lose because we were bringing back our families. Because the whole sharecropping system meant that families had to come together. That was the whole notion of family. When you look back at that period, you see families together. That was the reason why when a Marcus Garvey could come here, he could come here already having a family structure intact. Something that Garvey couldn't do today. Because the family structure today is not intact. So when we look at the worst period in our history was the period of FDR. And the period before that was Woodrow Wilson, because they were setting the stage for the raw deal. It wasn't the New Deal, it was the raw deal. And so when you look at what they began to do during the period of raw deal was to destroy the black family. The family that had for the last 50 or so years were able to reconstruct itself, but then they came up with this raw deal legislation, taking a tool out of our hand and putting a welfare check in our hand, which turned us from producers into consumers. You see, and as a consumer group, we are now victims and are vulnerable to all of their activities because we no longer existed as producers. So we really have to look at that period as the raw deal legislation. And then we have to look at the period of Lyndon Johnson, in my estimation, as a period when, under the guise of the Civil Rights Act of 1965, that act was designed to destroy black leadership. Because what it did was, it took away people like Malcolm and Martin and others and gave us some political puppets who are members of the Dixiecrat Party, which is the original slave party. So we have now run right back in the slave master's hands. You see, after so many years, because we're back in the Dixiecrat Party under his control, and therefore we are looking upon so-called black leaders as politicians, and they are already wedded to their own masters, because the one thing the white people do that we don't do is that they make you take an oath. You see, and your oath is that you have to obey them. So any man that takes a white man's oath, by definition, cannot be your leader, because he's already has sworn allegiance to your enemy. You see, but you pick those same people and say, well, they are our leaders, but they sworn their allegiance to your enemy. And so your enemy's puppets are leading you. And that's a Judas goat leading you to slaughter.
This is for the historians. I met Dr. Leonard Jeffries up in Harlem during the summer, right? And I asked him, how come nobody had the guts to get up and tell those Jews right in their face that it was a Jew by the name of Adolf Hitler, which is Adolf Hitler that started the Holocaust, right? You got to get these bastards' face and tell them where it's coming from, all right? And what happened?
No, don't point the mic, just talking to the American.
What happened is, nobody had the guts to tell these people that it was a Jew by the name of Adolf Hitler, the Nazis, that started the Holocaust. He was a half-caste Jew. He was an Austrian. Either his mother or his father was a Jew, and he was the one that started the Holocaust. So don't blame Dr. Jeffries, or don't blame me, because it's one of yours that started killing yours. You know what I mean?
It's a Dr. Clarke relationship to the Holocaust. There is a this role that happens inside and a number of activities that really distorting at this point in terms of, I guess, Jewish presentation of it. What are the things that we should know about the Holocaust?
First place, we should stop letting the Jews have a monopoly on the word Holocaust. The Belgians in the Congo killed at least 30 million people. Every major Holocaust against African people, the Jews of Europe participated in that Holocaust, colonialism and slavery, as Europeans, first and foremost. We should call it the European Holocaust or the German Holocaust. European racism has spent itself out outside of Europe. In Europe, it turned inward on itself. That created the German Holocaust. Some deals were tried. They tried to make certain deals, and they were going to buy certain portions of the deals. There was an internal fight between white people and white people. The Jewish problem was started in Europe by Europeans, should be solved in Europe by Europeans. Europeans are genius, draining the disease pulse of their political sores on the lands of other people.
draining other people's land in order to recoup fortunes that they spoiled themselves. This is one of the dimensions of global white supremacy that we did not discuss tonight, but sooner or later we're going to have to take the economics of it into consideration. I agree with Professor Wilson. We do need another whack at it, and when I can read my books, I'll see that date is open. I'll be back here because I was going to focus on slave and colonialism as global white supremacy.
Dr. Clarke, I'm sorry, Dr. Clarke, if you could, there's something that you mentioned to me that's probably around 1986 and had a very profound effect on how I perceive history. You talked about how in some chapters of history, we have to stop trying to find the good guy or the bad guy. Sometimes there are no heroes, I think was the way to do it.
Sometimes because of Hollywood's appeal, they keep looking for heroes. Some parts of history have no heroes, it's all villains. And sometimes also we have to stop looking for a charismatic leader. We have to look for a charismatic program.
Stage on microphone.
My name is Brother Abdul Hassan, and I have two comments and a question. The first comment is everyone or our brothers and sisters aware of the latest campaign being waged by the white man, the fact that he's trying to convince all the sisters to go unto him? Example, you look at the news station, you see always a white man and a black woman interacting. In magazines, you see white men and black women holding hands. Okay, that's one comment. The next comment is divine chastisement is in effect. What I mean by that is, do you notice how the white area in Oakland and Berkeley, California looks a lot like Iraq after the desert slaughter? Okay, and my question is to Professor Wilson. You mentioned that it's going to take force to remove the white man from his position. Is there a place for the brothers to train? And if there isn't, is there a place being talked about? Or is it in the works? Because there's a lot of brothers that are ready to take a stand and we just have nowhere to go.
Thank you.
Certainly there's a place, and my first announcement when I walked up to the podium was to publicly, not so publicly, indicate that a place is being prepared for that. The Pan-African Research and Development Foundation is very much concerned. In fact, we've already been doing very intense discussions of military strategy, geopolitical strategy, and so forth. That, of course, I won't talk about it all here. But this aspect, military strategy, economic strategy, because a good deal of the warfare in the future is really going to be economic in nature, is going to be very subtle. It's going to be more psychological and psychobiological in terms of germ warfare, the use of bacteria and other methods and approaches, and mainly it will be just economic control, the way in terms of what you're seeing happening in the Soviet Union, which was ultimately defeated in terms of a prolonged economic struggle between the United States and that group of unions here. If we listen carefully, the United States had indicated years ago that it would literally spin the Russians into the ground. And a good deal of the so-called arms race was not about the idea that the Russians were truly ahead of the United States or in direct competition with it militarily, but in projecting the image that it was ahead or near parity with the United States. They were able, of course, to motivate the American public to fund the military-industrial complex and to distort the Russian economy in such a way that ultimately it collapsed. And therefore, we as Africans must prepare ourselves to fight a battle, not only economically, not only militarily, but really a more of an intellectual and organizational kind of battle, and an economic sort of battle. And it is for this that, again, I urge the training, particularly of our males, so that we can undertake this kind of thing. Often we hear people talking about going back to Africa, and that's fine, but I also lay out the challenge. Why don't we take over America? Why don't we pursue? You see, when you look at the psychology of males, you know, we can talk about the organizational genius of Europeans, and that's a part of it. But one friend told me one day, after you get to talking about the organizational so-called powers of the European or the Japanese, whoever else you want to talk about, look at the fact that in the end they just came and took this land from people. And that the foundation of America is not its organizational genius, but the fact that they made a takeover. And when you look at what we call manhood training, in societies and groups where, let us say, what we would call cattle rustling in this country are necessary to a society that depends on cattle, the males are trained to rustle cattle and to take it from outsiders. Now, we have some morals, which is one of the problems we have there. But to a great extent, men must be trained to do what men must do in order to survive. If we look at the demographic orientations of this country, there's no reason why we cannot see, or at least explore the possibility of taking it over. I'd like to speak quickly to one issue raised earlier about organizations. One of the reasons why we had some problem with organizations, of course, is because of the European move against organizations. And to a good extent, it has conditioned too many of our people away from developing organizations because of the fear of the punitive response that would result from those organizations being developed. But despite that, they have to be developed. The other thing is, of course, the absence of the training of our people in organizational technique. We often think that it is enough that our people somehow happen to be what we need to be in order for us to exist and function as a people. No culture operates on that basis. No child is born ready for its culture. People must be trained to undertake their cultural tasks and roles. We cannot expect then a development of the correct organizations and powerful organizations and social relations and so forth unless our children are actually trained to do so. A major part of the male initiation rite was the training of the male not into chauvinism, but the training of the male in how to carry on organization, to operate within organization, and as you implied, to operate within an organizational structure and a structure of authority. A major part of the initiation rite of the male was to remove that male young boy's loyalty to mother and to the herd, and to transfer those loyalties to other males and to the hierarchical structure of authorities of other males. To bring then this new young male under the thrust and the direction of the older males so that they can continue the life of the group. At this point then we have to reestablish these kinds of training centers. And we have to restructure the actual training of our young men and women. We must also develop the idea of a nation within a nation.
Right.
We cannot correctly develop institutions, educational military or otherwise, until we develop the concept of nation. That we are a separate nation in this country, and we must function as a separate nation in this country. Once we recognize that we are a nation within a nation, we do not have to ask anyone's permission about citizenship. The Europeans did not ask the Indians permission to be a citizen. And consequently, when we recognize our peoplehood, we will not have to get the permission of anyone to be citizens or to be anything we desire to be as a people.
All right, let's keep moving right away. We got more people who raise questions or comments or guests, and we can go right to my left. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Henrik Clarke, and pertaining to Professor Clarke, I would like to know how did the white race begin, the origin, and pertaining to Professor Wilson. There's a lot of black homosexuals, and what is their role in our ongoing growth and development of the black movement, and can they be saved as far as psychological wise? I'm only saying this because I'm new with this. I'm new at coming around, and I have a lot of questions. I'm not gay, but I have a lot of questions, and I'm scared standing up here asking this question. But I'm grateful that you're giving me forgiveness that is backbone for me. I'm so grateful that I'm here to hear this information and education that I need for me as well as my family. That's it.
Thank you.
My